And I thought, I might be a professor of Czech literature.
I find that quite interesting. There's a real yin and yang going on in terms of how you approach your jobs.
Yeah, hoping to show that living on a small island is not a barrier to going on and achieving whatever you want to achieve.
It's not all wood panelling and quill pens anymore. We are real people and we really do want to help people.
I don't do court work, so I don't know if I'll give the bailiff a run for his money, so we'll see.
Well, joining me today are advocates Rose and Eleanor Colley. Hello to the pair of you. Lovely to see you.
Hello.
Hi, Gary.
I'm intrigued to know more about this unique situation that we find ourselves in, the only mother and daughter advocates working under the same roof in the Channel Islands. I'm going to stop mum first. Sorry, Advocate Colley. Rose, what's it like from your perspective?
I'm really proud of her. I hardly ever see her, even though we work in the same office, because we do very different sorts of work, as we will probably tell you later. But yeah, I never would have dreamt that this would happen all those years ago when she was born.
What I love is your eyes lighting up as you say this, because you are evidently bursting with pride about it. And I will spare your blushes here, Eleanor, but actually you can probably give me the more honest answer to that question. There you are, suddenly going to work, but going to work where mum is one of the partners of the firm. That feels like a bit of pressure on your shoulders.
Yes, certainly there was some pressure, but because I do such a different kind of law to my mum, then that's why it kind of works, I think. I wouldn't want to be a family lawyer perhaps in the same department, but it's nice. So
I really love it. I was thinking before we started talking about me and my parents, thinking about me and my dad as an electrician, and not for 1 second did I think of being an electrician. Was, though, watching Rose working her way through her stellar career, and we'll touch on some of it in the coming minutes. Did that inspire you in any way? In fact, did it put you off at times in any way?
Yes, so it wasn't originally my plan to be a lawyer, because my mum is a lawyer, my dad's a lawyer, and my husband is also a lawyer. So there are a lot of lawyers in the family, but actually that's just the way it turned out. And I guess you can say, well, it was written in the stars, so...
It was written in the stars, and your swearing in as an advocate of the royal court happened, as we all know, in this strange moment in our history where we live, where even the swearing in of advocates, rooted in that richest of tradition, is a little bit different during a pandemic. Yeah,
it was very different. Luckily enough, I was sworn in 3 years ago as an écrivain, so a Jersey solicitor. So at that time, I had all the nice drinks and everything, but I didn't have to make a speech. So this time, I did have to make the speech, but in some ways I was quite pleased because the audience was a little smaller than it would be normally. So if I was a little shy, then it's a bit more,
Well, Rose, you will remember that. In normal times, the Royal Court is packed to the rafters.
It is.
It's not just a special day for the advocates, but for colleagues and for proud family members. It's the legal equivalent of wedding day.
It is. And I can remember back in January 2000, when I was sworn in, it was like this big occasion where you had to shake everyone's hands and all the rest of it. But Eleanor's occasion was memorable in a number of ways, but I had a meeting with the bailiff the other day, and he said to me he will never forget Eleanor's swearing in, not because of, with respect, Eleanor, but because her dad, my husband, appeared with his cat on the screen.
Wow, tell me more.
So apparently it's the first swearing in where a cat has been an important part of the audience.
I don't know if there's any legal precedent or provision for that to happen, but we've probably
Apparently
seen
not.
a few of the Zoom videos knocking around on social media of lawyers all around the world. From your perspective, in that moment, were you aware of that, and what is that like when that happens?
Yes, so they had screens all around the court, so you could see your family. So I had my dad and my godmother beaming in from Liverpool and Rochester. And so when this cat appeared, I was like, oh no. But apparently it's the first cat ever in the royal court. So the cat, who's called Schnaps, will be very proud at least.
I like that. We're making history in lots of ways, including unexpected ways. Let's rewind a bit, Eleanor. Your journey to here, because your legal education actually is a transatlantic education. Just tell me about that journey. It is not the obvious route to get to here today.
When I was at school, then I went on a gap year and studied in Prague. And at that time, I met an American gentleman, and that took me over to the US and Columbia University in New York, where I studied for 3 years. But still, because you studied quite a wide range of subjects in the US as compared to the UK, you don't choose straight away. You have to do things like languages and maths and writing as part of the degree, whatever you choose to do in the end. Later, I majored in history and minored in Slavic studies, partly because of the time I'd spent in Prague, and I was able to do Czech at Columbia, unusually as a language. And then that took me Slavic studies then to Oxford, where I studied for 2 years for an MPhil. And so really, law wasn't in my mind at that time. So I was very into Eastern Europe, communism, the history, the language. And I thought, I might be a professor of Czech literature. But then the financial crisis was happening at that time. And then you obviously, after some time, realize, I can't study forever and I need to get a job. So I then went to study again at the College of Europe, where I had a scholarship, and that took me into European politics. But as part of that, I also studied European law, and that's what then got me interested in law. And I thought, it's not quite as boring as I expected. So you're looking at things there like discrimination and how that played out under EU law. So that was quite interesting. And so after that, I went to work at the European Commission in Brussels with my husband, Miguel. And then we didn't love living in Brussels, and I missed Jersey. And so one day I brought Miguel here. And he had a seafood platter, and the rest is history. And I thought, in Jersey, I'll come. And then I started to study law by going to London once every few weeks.
Yeah, I still remember the seafood platter. It was at the Oyster Box, and it was a beautiful day, so it couldn't have been a better day.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that we can talk about all the infrastructure things or the job prospects, all the black and white sort of sensible thinking mind things, but sometimes it's just that magic of this island that seals the deal. Yeah. And the law has many facets, and as you mentioned earlier, you're both in different areas. Rose, let's just talk about you. When people talk about family law in Jersey, they actually talk about you. You have become synonymous with a whole sphere of law in this island, and are respected as this island's preeminent legal practicing experts.
Oh, that's very sweet.
It might be sweet. It happens to be true based on speaking to a lot of people.
Yeah, I always say that family law is unusual in that it's not just law. I couldn't sit down every day and draft stuff because I'm really not very good at that. But what I am good at, I think, is dealing with people and particularly trying to find solutions and trying to think this is the strategy to try and get the best outcome, not only for the client, but as far as possible for the other party and, of course, the children.
And that's the bit that strikes me in this is it's lawyer, perhaps it's counsellor, perhaps it's therapist, perhaps it's shoulder to cry on, it's agony aunt, it's mum, sister, it's whatever those things are that it takes emotional intelligence and not just a thorough understanding of the law to be successful and also to be appreciated and trusted. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's right. And then, of course, you need also to use the skills that you've got when you do need to go to court. I mean, I always try and use court as the last resort, but sometimes it happens. Clearly, you need to keep some emotional distance from clients, but you can't help feeling for them and, more importantly, as I said, trying to find a path that will cause the less harm to everybody.
I'm going to ask a question you might not want to answer, but I hope you do. So we've got all of this legal knowledge, and we've got all of this passion for family law and relationships and the intricacies and roller coasters of all relationships in life. And then she comes home and she's your mum. I mean, what's that like? Because that's quite an unusual mum.
Yeah, definitely. No, but I think mum's always been very good at leaving the work at work.
Okay.
Being the mum at home and not letting all of that kind of impact our relationship or anything like that.
Because I did wonder that when you're just trying to have a mother-daughter, even arguments in your teenage years, and mum suddenly starts being legal and very sensible about it. Like, no, I just want to have a row with you, mum. Okay, so those things still happen.
But she does have a loud voice that she also uses in court, so I'm not going to say.
Now, from family law to corporate law, just explain what that actually is, because we hear it said a lot in legal circles in this island and elsewhere. What is corporate law? It sounds a big umbrella term that isn't actually that specific. What do you really do?
So really it's anything to do with companies or businesses, including partnerships, for example. As Mum said, it's very much, it's the opposite of what she likes to do. So really it's about not trying to draft documents so you don't end up in court. A lot of my job is doing drafting all day, every day. So it's really the exact opposite. So
I find that quite interesting. There's a real yin and yang going on in terms of how you approach your jobs.
Yeah.
And what do you get out of it? I can see from a family law perspective, because I'm quite an empathetic, emotional, human person, but I imagine in a very different way when you're preempting future problems through your drafting, that there is reward there. But how does that manifest itself? What do you get out of what you do?
I really enjoy the variety of the work. I mean, no 2 days are the same. And certainly, even with companies, it sounds quite dry on the outside, but people obviously still very much care about their companies. And we're lucky in Jersey that we deal with companies working on the international stage and also local businesses that real people here are trading with. And that's why at Viberts you have that real contrast of work, which is something I really enjoy. And you can easily get to know your real clients here as well, especially when you're working with the local traders.
And there's the local aspect, which is brilliant, but there's the global aspect as well, because, businesses have presences all over the planet. Your international background, it strikes me through your languages, through your work, through your relationship and where that's taken you as well, that you have that very global view literally on the world.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have clients from certain different countries, then that's already quite familiar to me, depending obviously on the jurisdiction. But no, that's something that definitely my global background, as you say, has helped with.
And it's not just the languages. I think it's also the knowledge, particularly where Jersey has so many international clients. I think it's also understanding how different parts of the world live, and I think it's a lot to do with understanding their culture. And Eleanor's knowledge can be really useful even in family law, because I've had to call on her twice in the last few months to explain something about Moldova and something about, in fact, the Czech Republic, and to find us some contacts there.
That's really interesting. So not just an asset for your clients, an asset for the whole firm.
The whole firm.
Now, Rose, before we talk a little bit more about you two, I do love this mother-daughter setup and learning more about the dynamic of you two. We can also announce today the launch of a new podcast and webinar series called Holding Court, the Jersey Law Podcast. You and I are going to be meeting up again.
We are.
Drilling deep into lots of areas of law. Why did you want to do this, and what do you think I can learn from this?
Okay. Well, again, it's really about family law, probably the only area of law that you could sensibly ask me about. I think because it's important to be able to get the information, not just to you, Gary, but to the wider public in a way that they don't have to read everything, that perhaps it can come across in fairly small nuggets. But I think we're going to be covering everything from divorce to same-sex relationships to children, even down to the tips and traps of not ideally using social media when you are going through a relationship breakdown.
And I can already imagine, before I hear the answers to the questions I want to ask you right now about that, where those pitfalls lie and how people might do that in a moment of crisis or fury, and how unwise that would prove to be in the cold light of day.
It happens all the time.
No. Okay, well, that is
Yeah.
Holding Court, the Jersey Law podcast. I'm really looking forward to that, and we'll share much more details everywhere as soon as we go live with that. Meantime, back to the here and now of you two. As you hear Eleanor talking about her career, are there moments along the way that spring to mind, moments along her journey where you think, goodness, I'm proud of that, or that will stick in my mind even because it was victory from the jaws of defeat? I don't know.
I think yes. I was immensely proud of her when she went to Columbia in New York because she had a scholarship to go there. It would have been unaffordable otherwise. And I could see that during the 3 years that Eleanor was in New York, she became this fascinating young lady. And even her accent, not surprisingly, changed. And then I think, again, I was really proud of her. She is the first person, certainly in my family, who's ever been to Oxford. And again, I think for her it was a great thing.
I was taking a sneak peek at the family photo album, and the one that jumped out from me was from Columbia University of that graduation day, because I think of graduation with a few dozen or a few hundred people. It's on an epic scale, and you were at the heart of that mass celebration.
Yes, so at Columbia, all the schools of Columbia graduate or have this commencement day at the same time, where they fill the whole entire quad, which is about 3 blocks of Manhattan.
Wow.
With all the students from the School of International Relations, the medical school, dentistry, just everybody all together. So it's this really nice, proud moment for everybody. And then, of course, you throw your hats and all of this. So
It's just so different to what we see from
Very
English
different.
universities, isn't it? It's something out of a Hollywood movie for me. But there you are, bringing that life experience back to the island in what you do day to day. Do you think that's brings something different to your role to perhaps other corporate lawyers because of all of that additional perspective? Perhaps you approach things a little bit differently?
I can be quiet, but I can also be assertive because, I got used to living in New York at that time, and you have to be quite assertive to make it as a New Yorker. So
That's quite an interesting perspective. Have you noticed that, Rose?
I did notice this, difference between leaving school, having the year in Prague, and then the 3 years in New York. There was this, well, I described it as a blossoming, but I can also see it was also to do with having to cope with life in New York, which is, as you know, very, very noisy, very, very busy. Although, of course, Eleanor had spent her younger years in London, but New York is a completely different way of life.
yeah, it's quite strange when you go to live in America. You think, oh, I know America, right? It's going to be like England. We watch Friends on TV. I know exactly what to expect. But actually, when you go there, it is very different. The culture is very different. For example, even going and buying milk, the first time I was like, I don't know which milk to choose. There are like 50 kinds of milk in the supermarket. And I ended up buying something called half and half, which is half cream and half milk. And then I drank it with my tea and I was like, ew.
I was about to say, well, we've skimmed across your career. That would be a bad milk pun, and I will not go there. The cream of the crop, clearly, at this stage. Here you are at very, very different points in your respective careers. What's your ambition, Eleanor? Here you are at this relatively early stage of your career, and certainly as an advocate of the royal courts, many years, decades ahead. What are your ambitions? What do you want to achieve?
I just want to be as successful as I can really be. And obviously my mother has set a very high bar for that, being now president of the Jersey Law Society. So that would be quite big boots to fill. So I don't do court work, so I don't know if I'll give the bailiff a run for his money. So we'll see.
That's an interesting opening line for me. You've given the bailiff a run for his money in his time, Rose?
We've had some debates, not just the current bailiff, but ones before him as well.
And a similar question to what I asked Eleanor just now. What about yourself? For more than 20 years now, you have been here at the forefront of family law. I'm guessing you're not suddenly going to change direction. No. But are there still ambitions that you hold? Or is it now, I've achieved a lot, I want to sustain this and help the next generation?
I think it's very much that. But also I'm finding since last autumn being the first female president of the Jersey Law Society. Really, really interesting because it's given me another dynamic and things to think about that aren't just family law and client related, because there are all sorts of projects that we want to try and carry through. And so, yeah, that's for me at the stage of my career that I'm at. That's actually given me fresh impetus.
It's interesting that you specifically pointed out first female presidents. How important is that to you in terms of representation and being aware that you've done that and you are now a role model for others?
For me, it's really, really important.
And what do you want to achieve in that position? Are there goals you have? Is there a change of tempo, of tone, of language? I don't know.
What I'm trying to achieve, and obviously the current pandemic makes this quite important, when I became president, what I really wanted to do was to have far more engagement with the younger members of the profession, because I think most of them have got not a clue about what the Law Society does or what it can do for them. But also there does need to be slightly tighter regulation of the Law Society here in the profession, I think. And then that will feed into benefits to the public. We're also going through, as you probably know, a reform of the legal aid system. So there are really interesting projects, big
for
projects.
The whole industry.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, back under the firm's roof, there you are both making a difference as well. The next big thing on the agenda for you at Viberts, the pair of you?
Yes, so I'm working with Pippa Davidson, and we're going to be setting up Inspiring Girls in Jersey, which is a branch of an international charity now in 21 countries, founded by Miriam Gonzalez. And the work that we're going to be doing is working with girls aged 10 to 15 and finding them female role models, so in Jersey, so ladies that they can aspire to be like if they want. Because obviously for myself, I've had such a good role model with my mother. And so it's really nice that girls can have the opportunity to have that and think that there's no barriers to them, you know, despite all the gender stereotypes we have in the world. So they can aspire to be whatever they want to be and fit them with role models who can help them do that.
This is going to sound like the most ridiculous question, but I'm going to ask it. Why do you want to do this?
I think just because I've been so lucky and had the opportunity to do so many things, and I just really love Jersey and working in the community, as you know, working at Viberts, and just giving girls, hoping that they'll have the same opportunities that I've had, and also because we live on such a small island, hoping to show that living on a small island is not a barrier to going on and achieving whatever you want to achieve.
And what about yourself, Rose?
I think the same, but of course we've got our podcasts.
Well, shall we do a final shameless plug for this?
Go on.
Holding Court, the Jersey Law podcast. I'm very excited about this. For me and other people who are watching or listening in the coming days and weeks and months and years, because it will sit there to share forever. What do you want us to get out of this? Not just in terms of subject matter.
I think it's really important that people understand if they have a legal problem, then lawyers are approachable. There are many firms like ours who will offer, let's say, a 30-minute free appointment, and we try and make people comfortable. It's not all wood panelling and quill pens anymore. We are real people, and we really do want to help people.
And it's also not about everything ending up high drama in court. In fact, success often looks the exact opposite of that for both of you. This is about preventing problems before they escalate.
Another thing to add to how we're not all very old-fashioned is that we also deal with some extremely new legislation. It's changing all the time. For example, the data protection legislation that came out 3 years ago now. We've been working with that weekly, and you just can see the impact that that's been having on the whole world. Mm-hmm. So that's very interesting, and that's obviously cutting-edge legislation, obviously with big ramifications for the tech industry, etc.
And I think people forget that these laws that can seem like abstract concepts, actually, they're things that affect every aspect of our lives.
And in fact, and I mentioned this in our podcast, but even this morning, I realised that our children law does not recognise same-sex mums and dads.
We will delve into that and much more besides. Well, I think from going from Jersey to Europe to North America, imagining how to buy the right milk in a shop in New York, we've proved today we're all humans at the end of the day, and some people are flourishing in their careers, and you two today are shining examples of that. Advocates Eleanor and Rose Colley, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary.
And thank you for watching.